Okay, we're going to start again because I think I was talking and it wasn't set up properly. So I'll start again and everyone in the room will listen to my talk twice. So I'm Rebecca, been at JP Morgan for 14 years, was running tech products there, a variety of infrastructure products. I left in January to start two businesses. One's a consulting business focused on tech product, compliance, humans and compliance. The other one's education for product people, all around economics. So today we are going to talk about some of the boring bits of entrepreneurship. We are going to cover how you do your market research, road testing, go to market, all of these things that are slightly dull, but you do need to be thinking about if you're trying to take your idea and get it out there into the world. So researching and road testing. The most important thing I would say to anyone is start with your problem and spend more time than you could possibly think about on the problem. You might have a brilliant idea. I'm sure everybody on this call in this room has had great ideas, but I think this was Michael was kind of saying this earlier. If there isn't a true problem, a pain that's being felt in the market, the solution isn't going to land. It needs to come in and it needs to address something that people are feeling day to day. And the market is, generally, depending on the industry, is quite oversaturated with new ideas with startups at the moment. So spend time thinking about the problem. Don't be afraid to be niche. People buy niche, right? There's lots of big companies out there trying to solve lots of different problems. Don't try and be one of those from day one. Just think about, where is it that I'm feeling pain? Where is it that people I know are feeling pain? And how do I go after that? And yeah, you'll find that if you do research into some of the big companies, they were always starting with that problem. They were never necessarily thinking about the solution from day one. So people is the other side of it, really getting to know your customers, and we'll talk a bit more about that and go to market, but really understanding who your customers are, zeroing in on who they are, and really being able to define that as a category of people. Don't just say for everybody, because that's no good. That's not, you're not going to be able to sell that. A really good example of this is Monzo. Monzo weren't looking or setting out to build a bank. They were trying to address the issues with UX in the UK. So the UK has always been quite an old-fashioned banking environment. And so Monzo really set out to solve that by being a digital-first, online-only bank. So I was going to do a bit of audience participation. If people don't want to, that's okay. But yeah, is anybody trying to solve a problem? And do you know if that problem is a pain point that's experienced in the world that we can actually identify in a very succinct way? Yeah, do you want to go?
Yeah, solving a problem for people who are in university and what paths are taking after.
Yeah.
It's something which I'm experiencing. There's many options, and it's hard to find one. And even if you do find one where a goal you want to do, what is the path to actually get there?
Great.
So that's the problem that I'd like to hopefully solve.
Amazing. And maybe later we can talk a little bit about customers and also a specific segment of that university market. So we could probably use stats, right, to identify where is the most university students not going directly into the industry. That would probably be an easy to find stat, and going after that segment specifically. Anybody else want to share any ideas? It's okay. We can talk more about it later. Cool. Right. Feedback loops. Oh, sorry. I think my my nice transition I had on this slide has gone. It's fine. Don't let's ignore the transition in Canva, and ignore the fact that looks really messy now. But anyway, so feedback loops. I would say early on in your journey, be looking for how you can get feedback from your customers. And I know we talked about that a little bit earlier. So how can you get all sorts of different types of feedback? So intrinsic feedback. If you're building an app, how can you build feedback into the product? Leo also talked about this in the marketing flow. How do you get data stored around feedback loops? So is a user dropping out of a flow? Is something happening in the transaction that's slowing the user down? is the user reaching a certain point and not able to like proceed through your flow, and being able to identify that. If you start to build an application and get it out there in the world, you will find that the need for that to be resolved real time, or as close to real time as possible, is the expectation will be there. So thinking about that early doors, how do we build that into the system? There are tools out there that you can use. You could try and build it yourself. You could probably try and hack it a little bit with Lovable or whatever. And then within the flow, how do you build in this quantitative and qualitative analysis as well? So we talked a little bit about surveys earlier, but how do you do ratings? How do you capture the analytics based on the user's experience? Do you need to include different types of feedback loops within a single flow? Are there different stages to your customer's journey that you need to include the feedback loops in? And then qualitative. So this is once you've got the word out, once you've got customers, can you actually get feedback from them? Or even outside of your customers, in terms of your target market, is there opportunities for you to go out and like interview them, get a bit more feedback on what they're experiencing? There's different ways you can do this. One way could even be to go to data holders and say, hey, I'm looking to get some research going. Can I please pay for some data? That's why they're there, to capture the data and make money because you want to buy it. But you could do this in other ways. You could do this via social media. You could do this via, well, like LinkedIn as an example. You could do this in lots of different ways. Don't ever stop looking for feedback on your product. If you are concerned with one part of your product, look for all these different feedback loops in terms of providing you that information with shaping how your product is going to flow into the future. And I suppose the other thing on feedback is also trust your gut. If you're a founder, you know your product, the product's kind of like part of you. If you don't feel like something's right, if you don't feel like something's going in the right direction, maybe use your feedback loops to explore that topic a little bit more. And really, like, don't leave it unturned, especially if you're in the early stages. You've got time. There's no pressure on you to like get it out there. Okay, I think this is going to be a good one for everybody because, and again, what's happening with the formatting? Bit weird. Didn't look like this when I sent it. I will be speaking to Canva about that. So the road test, the road to production, it can be long, and that's okay, right? And different people will give you different advice. Some people will say just get something out there, just build something, get it out there as quickly as possible. But this is coming from a bit more of like an enterprise perspective. This is how we build things. We start off with POV, and actually you do a little quiz. Does anyone know what POV would stand for?
Point of view.
No. So this is, again, it's very enterprise, right? So it's a proof of value. So this is before you even got to proof of concept. This is, let's say you're talking to a vendor about their product. You're maybe looking to swap it or something like that. You're literally doing an on paper feature comparison from one to the other. So if you're building a product, you'd be looking at the market and literally have a list of features that your competitors offer and doing that side by side comparison in a table or something like that. That is something really handy to have down the line when you're talking to investors and being able to demonstrate like this is where we stand out from the market. So yeah, proof of value is something that we would maybe have an NDA in the enterprise space, like sign the NDA, just have the general conversation with the vendor. Then we would move into POC, which is yes. So that's where you're starting to get hands on. That's where you're actually starting to craft something. You're starting to have a play with how you take that proof of value, those feature sets, and implement it. When you're building something, you are looking at like, what are the foundations? What would actually this application look like? There's a lot of design in the POC stage. Even at this point, I would be bringing customers in, right? Even in enterprise, we would bring customers in at the POC stage. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that what you're looking at and what you're starting to build is still solving for that problem. and you've not gone, oh, I'm really enjoying this and I'm just going to go in this direction because it sounds exciting and interesting. No, but always bringing it back to that problem statement, always bringing it back to your customers and your audience, your people. And then we move into the kind of proper building stages. So in the MVP space, there's a couple of different phases. In JP Morgan, we would never really use the MLP, MAP stages at all because we are functional. So MVP is fine. Anyone know what the MLP, MAP acronym stand for? So obviously we've got minimum viable product, which is that. So minimum, like, what does it mean for this app to look like? And then you've got minimum lovable product. So it's sort of the next stage. It's really taking the MVP and making it a little bit more fancy, making it a little bit more attractive to your customers. And then MAP is the minimum awesome product. So this is where some of your more modern companies, they'll be skipping all the MVP and MLP stages and going, hey, we're actually going to put this like out there in the market and say, this is what we're building. We're really proud of it. And here's a demo of it or something like that. So it's definitely not something we would do on the B2B side. We would definitely stick in the MVP range. In MVP, at least for us, this would be the point in most big enterprises where you're having the conversation about investment. So you're trying to make decisions about whether you then proceed to like build something that can then be piloted, but then be tested with your customers, with your users, etc. Because normally up until that point, you've been in kind of like a strict build schedule. And then you're asking, right, are we going to invest more in order to make this something that we can put out there? It for you guys as like, you know, early founders, you should be putting it out there before, like at this stage anyway, right? You should be getting people to test it. You'd like develop an API, go get someone to test the API. You know, if you're in CompSci, you've got loads of friends that can just go and build something and try and hook into it. If you haven't built your security layer yet, go build your security layer right now and get people to start hacking it and attacking it. Work out where your problems are and go fix those first. But that stage is always exciting, but it can be disappointing because you might feel, oh, it's not quite ready yet. We have to stay in that stage a little bit longer. Then we get into a pilot. So for your idea, have you got like an idea of what you want to achieve from a pilot? Have you got an idea of what you want success to be in order to then move forward into a proper launch? Or
giving them the advice.
Yeah.
If it's the actual feedback from the users, it's positive enough.
Yeah.
Towards the benchmark, then you can.
Yeah. Cool. So I think you mentioned benchmarks, and I think that's perfect. In the pilot stage, you absolutely want to be having some metrics or benchmarks that you are trying to hit in order to then proceed to a launch and a proper, like, put something out there in a full stage. The other thing with pilot is I would be saying engagement levels can vary. So you might put something out there to 100 people, you might get 10 people respond. Maybe saying in the pilot stage, actually, we need to have feedback from at least 50 people before we want to move forward. That might mean we need to run through several phases of pilots. You might also find the way you do pilots might need to shift. So you might do email blasts, you might do social media, but you might also find you do an event or something and get people to scan a QR code and go that way. Different explore, do different things. And then launch, and we're going to move into go to market. I think launch is a big thing, and people like make a big thing. It's launch day. Don't need to make it a big thing. Can just be like, right, we're finally moving into our production environment. That means certain things, like we're going to protect our data in a different way. We're actually going to stabilize our QA environment. I'm saying this like technical language. I think it's important that you sort of almost treat your launch seriously. You don't need to market it, but you yourselves treat it seriously. Like, okay, we're going to be out there. The data piece, especially in the UK, is so important that we've got that locked down and protected, that we're not we're not worried. If anything goes wrong with launch, we're not worried. We're safe and secure in our data and all the protection that's needed there. I could talk a lot more about that, but it's probably not for today. We've talked about this stuff a little bit, but as you move into launch, really going back to your original plan of who are your customers, and making sure that when you're thinking about customers, you've got your segments, but you're also thinking about how are they going to find you? Are they, a university students? You've obviously got your certain channels, right? If you were targeting retirees, as an example, you might not be using the same channels. You're not necessarily using TikTok, right? I'm being very generalizing there, but you're probably not using TikTok as your first point of entry. So the channel you choose is key. And making sure as well that that channel is giving you enough data on the feedback side. So are you actually able to analyze the clicks? Are you able to analyze the views, that sort of thing? Certain channels like LinkedIn is okay, but it doesn't give you the most amount of information possible. So can you build it in your app? Are you going to be able to trace that data all the way through from click to app use? Pricing, don't be afraid to price something from day one, right? Now, I'm not saying go and charge everyone loads of money, but don't be afraid to put a price on something. Think about at the moment you're students, but at some point this might become your full-time job. Think about yourself. Don't not give yourself a salary just because you have to, right? You're putting time and energy into something. Price it that way, and it helps people to believe there's value and validation in the idea by pricing it. And then this line, I wrote this line, but I think what I really want to say about how you build trust and things is really more about loyalty. So how do you create something that keeps people within your ecosystem? I have a whole, which I could do another time, have a whole session around Apple and Meta and how they have created this very unique ecosystem where it's very difficult to exit, and what that has actually done in terms of the value that they place on customers and the lifespan. And even for me, I don't use social media, but I definitely have a Facebook account somewhere that's somewhere along the line is definitely ticking up their account numbers and things. So how do you, within your app space, create community? How do you create other click-throughs? Where's the opportunity for you to generate revenue in different places? What is it about the app that's going to keep people hooking back in, and it not just be a one-time use, or I'll use it for a couple of weeks and then it goes away? What are the things about it that keeps that attention and coming back to your app? I might just I'm going to go into operability in a minute, but has anybody got any questions on anything so far? Okay, cool. Right, operability. So thinking about some of the potential things that could go wrong, even when you're early. So what happens if you go to launch and your payment provider goes down? Have you got insurance for what happens if your customers using your product, they've paid for it and then you need a refund? Have you got something in place to provide that refund? Have you got your own insurance if needed for your credibility? The switching thing, again, this links back into Meta. What does the journey like for customers to switch into your application? If they need to switch, what's that look like? How do you solve that problem for them? If you think of what's the barrier to entry into your product, they're already using something. How do you get them to switch, and how do you make that transition as easy as possible? And there was one other thing I was going to talk about, and I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, obviously a couple of weeks ago, Anthropic had that massive leak and there was all sorts of issues. They took themselves offline for a bit. What happens if you're somewhere along the line, you've done some vibe coding and you're hooking back into your Claude system somewhere? What happens when Anthropic accidentally has a leak? Like, thinking about these things when you're going out there into the real world. This is like wearing the mindset of, you know, an enterprise organization when you're a startup. It shouldn't take away from the freeness and the joy of being a solopreneur or doing things yourself, but starting to think about like having the process and the mindset around what would this look like if we were a big company. And I wrote this like plan for the failures before they happen, not after, and plan for the successes before it happens, and be ready to scale, which nicely leads on to let's not do that. This one. Scaling is not just more customers, it's more of everything, right? So when we are building software in this day and age, we're thinking not just about you know, people having access to a laptop and hooking into the internet. We're thinking about, wow, I've got to increase my database size, right? In fact, the database that I originally built this with is not going to be good enough as my organization is scaling or as my product's growing. Need to be thinking about something that's a bit more stable. And there's lots of different databases out there you could look to use, but especially if you're working in the regulated space, you need to be looking at all the different ISOs, all the different regulations, thinking about what it is that's going to be expected of you, regardless of your size, in terms of data, failover, all of that sort of thing, making those decisions and thinking about compute and infrastructure early, projecting that forward. What happens as my customer base grows, my infrastructure costs grow? Am I going to be able to make that work? Have I got enough like reserves to actually afford that? Have I got enough coverage between myself and myself to support a product that's out there with 1,000 users? Like, people have high expectations of customer service in this day and age. So thinking about, do I need to build a couple of bots? Do I need an agent? All those things. And how am I going to justify investing in those things when I've still got to build into my product that's just gone live? It's not to be a buzzkill. It's just that I think what happens with a lot of startups is they start off very excited, they go out there, they build something that's really awesome. Maybe they get investment, right? You get funding, and then you start to get really big, and then what? And then it's still just you, and then you're panicking, and you're up all night, and you need to hire someone, and you've got to do that because it's just you, and you've still got to run the company and do all of these things. Having that plan, being confident in that plan and the projections that you've got, having that really clearly laid out, that's going to be the difference if you're sitting in front of an investor. Because, and we talked about this, I know, again, don't want to be a buzzkill. Investor doesn't care about your blockchain. Investor doesn't care about your sexy encryption. They want to know numbers. And so that's why we're going to talk about money next, because it's important. And I've spent so long in finance that, yeah, I just think this is something that we need to be talking about. Hopefully you're learning this. Hopefully you are learning this in your business classes. If you're not learning this, here you go. And again, the slide did not look like this when I sent it over. But anyway, so these are some of the things that I would be looking for. And as an investor, these are some of the things that I had to report on running big teams in enterprise. So what is it costing you to acquire every customer? So this is, how do you take all your sales and marketing costs, divide it by the number of customers you've had in the last 6 months or last year, and what is that number? And that number is important because that number needs to be trajectorying down as you grow. And if that number's going up, that's a very bad sign, and you need to be like doing something to reduce your sales and marketing costs or something in order to bring that down. So this is an important one, especially from a product perspective, is understanding how much it costs to get your customers in the door. And then LTV, oh, I should say, so customer acquisition cost, and then you've got lifetime value. So what is a customer worth over the lifespan that they're with your product? So you might be not, aware of some, actually a lot of companies will do this, where you're bought in for a certain amount of time. So you've got a service plan for 2 years, let's say. They do that so that they can guarantee your custom over the course of however long you're here. And in terms of that calculation, I wrote it down so I can remember it. Yeah, so it's the total investment divided by the contract lifespan. So let's say over the course of the lifespan, you spend £2,000. Your average lifespan as a customer with that company is 4 years. You divide that number, and that gives you what is your customer worth over their lifespan. And again, that number is important to like your CFO and to finance, because that number is essentially telling you is what we're investing in getting the customers in the door actually paying off in the long term. And so that those two numbers, they play kind of in the same wheelhouse. The others are sort of they are basic, but they are things that will be on your P&L. And maybe I should say as well, like even early doors, I would be saying like having a check-in on all your numbers regularly, maybe quarterly. How much are we spending? Where is the money going in terms of infrastructure, in terms of sales, marketing, adding in maybe your salaries, depending that you want to pay yourself. And what are we getting back? Like, what is the customer paying for, or what do we project that the customer's going to pay for? What does your P&L actually look like? That type of or that level of detail is again what investors are going to be looking for. Annual burn rate. So if they were to give you £10,000, how fast are you going to spend that money? Where are you going to spend that money? And how long is it going to take before you're going to earn that money back from your customers? Those are some of the things that I would definitely be thinking about if you're in like the end of year one of building your product and getting into the habit of doing those numbers on a regular basis, so that you've got all the data available. There's a process for making the data available. There's a process for translating that data into a visual for investors. If you got a phone call tomorrow, angel investor randomly came across your LinkedIn, was like, I want to have a conversation, you should be ready. You should be ready with all your numbers, all your data, all your slides ready to go like that minute, because you never know what could happen. Cool. So I think we're nearly done. So yeah, some of the bits of running your own business or being in business are boring, but important. Plan for production today, even if you've just got an idea on a piece of paper. Think about what does that idea look like when it's running in production. Don't ignore problems. So think about problems that you're facing. Think about those sort of like niggling things in the back of your mind, and try and like plan and prioritize to get them fixed today. And produce your financial projections for that angel investor that's going to ring you tomorrow. This is my kind of homework is if you haven't got an idea or you're not sure where to start, just start validating the problem. Don't worry too much about the solution or honing that solution. Just keep going after the problem and start to build a picture of what that problem looks like, who it is, where you can access them, how they could access you, and really like nailing the problem statement, and then use your AI tools to like come up with solutions for that. Don't burn your brain thinking about the solution too long. Think about the problem more. I think that's everything. If you anyone has any questions, online.
I have no questions.
Cool. I don't know if anyone on
Actually, I have one question. You just mentioned someone interested with maybe my project and ask for detail. And sometimes I would hesitate. Is it good for me to provide the whole story to the one I'm not very familiar with? I don't know who is it. And some case, my friend already told me that the full case already told the so-called investor, but finally, the whole story copied by other party,
Mhm.
and then I got nothing.
Yeah.
So how to prevent this kind of hesitation or risk?
So I definitely always have an elevator pitch prepared. So the idea, you get into an elevator with someone and they ask you what you're working on, and being able to give them their 30 seconds before they get to the floor that they're going to. This was like a classic at JP Morgan. We were like practice this over and over again because you just never knew who you might get into a lift with. And I think also having in your mind that you don't need to be selling from a money perspective in that conversation, but selling from yourself. If you don't know, if you're not expecting it, people buy people, not the product. So just selling from yourself, but having the game face on, right? Not that you have to have a mask on, but just having that, practicing that pitch, being ready to say, hey, this is who I am. That's enough. That's enough, I think. Yeah. But if you are in more of a formal environment, then yeah, sure, being able to pull up your P&L is definitely, I mean, that's a good look, I think. Being ready and organized. Yeah.
Any other question?
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Due to, I think, business. How to judge, you say, the role test, different stage. How can I know where am I? And what's the right moment for me to move on?
Well, I think you do have to be strict with yourself in terms of setting your benchmarks and setting you can set it yourself, right? What you want to achieve before you move on to the next stage, and holding yourself accountable to that. I think
sometimes
yeah,
maybe there's something wrong and then I shift,
Yeah.
I feel that I shift quite often, but maybe that's the right road, right direction. I have to go further to see the problem and then solve the problem. Maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think you do have to make a judgment call, but also validating, like making sure you're validating that the problem and the potential solution with somebody else. I think having that, like, I mean, we often in the like business world will talk about having your trusted board. So even though you're a small company or a startup, having your kind of trusted people around you that you can use to bounce ideas off or go to when you've got a problem, I think building that is important. So you've got someone that you could say, hey, I think there's a problem with this. I think this is the direction, but I don't know what the consequences of this are. Can we work it through? I think that's so again, kind of having that mindset of like being an enterprise before you're an enterprise, build your board of people that are invested in you, invested in the product, that are happy to give you honest feedback. I think that's, yeah, it's really helpful. Then you're not in your head as well. If you're more experiencing things on the tech side, I would still be creating whatever you're using to decide what you're going to work on next. Create bugs. Like if you're using Jira, like create a bug in Jira if you identify something and it can be there. And if you prioritize it and decide it doesn't need to be fixed before you go live, then make sure it's at the top of your list to fix as soon as you've gone live. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if you're not using Jira or something like that, I think definitely having something. Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah. Question here.
Yeah, like if you're not using Jira, I would definitely be having something like Miro or something that you can use to capture like all the things that you're seeing, like ideas, feedback, all of those things. Like Miro is great. Like I don't know what their free tier's like, but it's so good. You can just take things and oh, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, to be honest.
Can you talk about it?
Yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry. The question is, can investing in another business help your business significantly? I mean, I don't know if I would say significantly. And the other thing is, I mean, I'm very, and this is coming from finance, I am very stingy, like frugal. I don't think you don't spend money unless you have to spend money. Be really, really careful about where you're investing. And I think if you've got an idea and you're looking after your idea, like invest more in the idea. Don't get distracted. Don't get distracted by the shiny things that are happening around you. Focus on your idea and make your idea shiny. Yeah. I can't say though. I don't know if I have enough experience to be able to show you whether that's true or not. But from a sort of solopreneur perspective, I would say no, focus on your thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Oh, thank you.